Should superannuitants who are still earning big bucks in retirement pay a special higher tax rate to cut the cost of pensions? Well, that's one idea up for discussion in a 3-yearly review of retirement policy being carried out by the Commission for Financial Capability. Super currently costs $39 million a day. I'll say that again, $39 million a day. And that could rise to $120 million a day in the next 2 decades. The proposal could see some over 65s paying a top tax rate of 39%. So that's higher than the current top personal tax rate of 33 cents in the dollar in a bid to bring the bill down. I asked Interim Retirement Commissioner Peter Cordtz how exactly it would work.
This piece of work from Susan St. John and Claire Dale at University of Auckland is suggesting a special tax scale for those over 65 to help claw back some of that from high income earners. So it's an income tax for what you earn over and above super. It is not a means test. And so what they're proposing is this tax rate would apply to any additional income you earn beyond 65 while you're drawing super.
So in essence, super would be a universal income for those over the age of 65. You'd all get that regardless of your earnings under this proposal. And then what? Every dollar you earn on top of that would be subject to a tax rate of what level?
Well, it's a progressive scale. I guess one of the things that is interesting and worthy of consideration around this particular proposal is that it retains New Zealand Super's status as a universal benefit and which provides a basic level of income for all New Zealanders in retirement beyond 65. But that progressive scale means you would pay tax on what you earn over and above that. And for the vast majority of over 65s who still work, many of them work part-time and wouldn't be high-income earners. There's, I guess, the progressive nature of it would protect them from any modest extra income.
So they'd be paying around 17.5% tax.
That's right. And the sliding scale on this thing would be potentially, and what St. John and Dale are suggesting is a top rate of around 39%.
So higher than the actual income rate at the moment, the top income tax rate being 33%. So they're suggesting a rate that's higher than that.
Yeah, they're proposing a rate of 39% at the top end. But even with that, you would have to be earning, I think it's $123,000 beyond over and above super to break even. The break-even point, I guess, the point at which government is potentially clawing back all of your super. You're earning over $123,000 per annum.
Okay, so just to be clear on that point, once you hit additional earnings of $123,000, you would effectively have wiped out your super payments. You would have paid them back in the tax rate that you're paying on your extra income.
That's what this modelling suggests. That would be the effect of it. You'd still be receiving super, but the tax you're paying at that level of income means that super would effectively be clawed back.
So, I mean, how would you reconcile that top rate of 39% with the personal tax rate of 33%, or would that personal tax rate have to change as well? Because otherwise, it arguably is unfair.
Well, and I guess those are the sorts of things that we're looking at now. We've still got a couple of pieces of research to land. Submissions and public feedback are open till the end of this month, and through November we will look at everything that's being proposed for recommendations that I'll make in December. But until then, I guess one of the things that we have to look at, and you make a good point, one of the things that we've been asked to look at with this review, this is an exercise that happens every 3 years, alongside affordability, which is, I guess that recurring theme, looking at issues of vulnerability and equity at current settings. And I guess one of the things that potentially this does is creates another level of imbalance or inequity, I guess, for some. But I guess, and those are the sorts of things that we'll need to consider as we look at what we recommend.
What do you think of this as an idea?
the part of our super model that is the envy of the world, and that's simplicity and universality. It doesn't tinker with that. It's also something, compared to the discussion about age of eligibility, which is, potentially still on the table. It always has been, and probably always will. And I guess with longer life expectancy and ageing population, it's inevitable at some point, that the age of eligibility would be looked at. But a sort of
politically, the current government has given a clear indication that it's not going to go there. So if you want this to happen quickly, raising the age is off the table.
Yeah, look, and I think raising the age anyway, and even under the previous government, who had indicated an interest in looking at it, the time frames they were talking about, nothing happens quickly if you're moving age of eligibility. So one of the things to like about, I guess, this proposal is that it is something that could be acted on sooner rather than later. We're not talking about a time frame of decades here for some of that change.
So how soon would you anticipate, if this was an idea to be adopted, how soon would we need to or want to do it?
Well, look, I guess that's up to the government of the day. But what do you
reckon?
Well, look, what we know is the case is if you look at the numbers long term, they don't stack up. And we are not saying, and I guess this is one of the risks with the age of eligibility discussion, or even means testing for that matter. We're not saying the sky's falling now, but when you look at the numbers, super currently tracking at $39 million a day. In 20 years' time, that trebles, $120 million a day because of our ageing population. Across that same period, the number of work-age people, the number of those over 65, reduces from 4-to-1 to 2-to-1. And I guess this is a key piece for people to understand. It's today's taxpayers who fund today's superannuitants. So when you look at those numbers, if nothing changes, they don't stack up. The numbers don't work.
Yeah, well, you would be acutely aware of the fact that Winston Peters would argue this point with you. He says we can afford it, that we'd only be spending about 8% of GDP on super by 2060, and there are plenty of other countries who are paying way more than that right now. It's about choices, he would argue.
Yeah, look, and there is, and I was involved in the 2016 review as well, and as there was then, there is now. There is plenty of speculation around what various policy settings might do to long-term affordability. Plenty of speculation around the part the growth in the economy would play as super as a percentage of GDP. But the bit that is absolutely irrefutable when you look at the demography is that with lower birth rates, longer life expectancy, if nothing changes, and I'm not talking just New Zealand super, in terms of government spending and taxation levels, if nothing changes, it doesn't stack up. The numbers don't work long term.
As you would appreciate, there's probably a collective gasp going around the country while we're discussing this from some people. I'm just wondering, why do you think there is such resistance to changing super when we're constantly having conversations about cutting the amount of money that other beneficiaries are getting? Are these two groups seen differently?
I think they are seen differently, clearly seen differently. I mean, I talk about New Zealand super is the biggest benefit in town, and it is. At $39 million a day, it is by far and away the biggest grant benefit, whatever you want to call it, paid out by government.
How do people react when you use that terminology to describe it?
Well, I guess those who see it as an entitlement have a problem with that. I've paid tax all my life. I'm due it. And I guess this is that bit that it becomes important to understand that today's taxpayers fund today's superannuitants. There isn't a magic pool of funds somewhere that New Zealand super is paid from.